Ian Bishop, thanks so much for agreeing to do this interview with us. I think it's like 7 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand.
It is. Thanks for having me on, Ryan. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you once again. Yeah, it was an hour earlier than I thought it would be. So you owe me.
Big time, big time. West Indies versus New Zealand. This is it's a challenging tour for everybody, for every cricketing nation. What do you think it'll be for West Indies?
Tough. It's going to be another tough one if you compartmentalize the two formats of the game that they'll be playing. Both very important, the T20 format, because you want to build a head of steam going into the potential or proposed T20 World Cup next year in about a year's time, give or take a month or two. And so you want to find your best combination. You want to start winning. You want to give guys match reps. So the T20 format, very important. And the tour will more than likely be remembered, whatever the result for the test series. A test team that needs to be doing a lot better than it has been, particularly away from home. And winning in New Zealand is a tough job.
Yeah, let's talk about the T20 team first. How concerned are you? Phil Simmons said that the preparation for the men's T20 World Cup next year started in January. How concerned or satisfied are you with the progress of this team heading into a World Cup next year?
I'm neither. I'm a little bit ambivalent, if I may say so, because of what the impact that COVID has had on cricket, on international cricket and domestic cricket. I think you'll give them a bye there. There needs to be going forward, starting from this, well, not starting from this tour, as you said, Phil said it was January. Going into this tour, going into the Bangladesh tour, Sri Lanka, whoever else they play next year, then there's another IPL, there's perhaps another CPL to come before that T20 World Cup. There needs to be a lot of reps. There are a number of gaps that need to be filled. So without being overly concerned or overly satisfied, I'll say that there needs to be the answer to some questions going forward.
I'm glad that you mentioned Phil Simmons as well. He's just about marking just over a year in as retaking West Indies cricket, the men's senior cricket team. I mean, there's not much to judge him on this year, but what have you made of Phil Simmons in 1 year?
It would be foolhardy to judge anyone who's been in the job for a year with COVID and what COVID has done. You have to remember that training schedules, domestic cricket, research and development cricket, I call it, has been impacted. They went to England. The first test match was good. The showing in the next two test matches weren't as good. So again, it's hard to draw any concrete conclusion. So I think coming now, this tour of New Zealand, if the West Indies go to Bangladesh, when they host, I think it's Sri Lanka and someone else next year, then we will get a better gauge. But Phil knows that T20 World Cup, they need to start moving upwards of that number 9 position in the world rankings. Defending champions at number 9, that is hard to conceptualize.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Andre Fletcher had an article about him in crickbuzz.com, a very interesting read in which he was asked about winning 2 T20 World titles and West Indies being ranked. He called it a quote-unquote imbalance. What are your thoughts on West Indies having won 2 World T20 titles? I do believe that you watched them win 2 World T20 titles as well, but doing so badly on the consistency level.
Well, it's what happens in between that winning of that second World Cup, in particular in 2016 to now. There was a change of captaincy. Carlos Brathwaite was, I think the West Indies have played 47 T20 internationals in that time since winning that second title. Carlos Brathwaite, I think, played 33 of them. Evan Lewis, I think, played 31. And then you look at the rest of the guys who actually helped to win that World Cup. Sunil Narayan has played less than 20 games. Andre Russell has only played a couple in the last few years. Kieron Pollard only taken over the captaincy recently. Lendell Simmons has only played a handful. So there have been a lot of absentees of that excellent squad. Samuel Badri has since retired from the international game. And so that plays a part, the inconsistency in having the best team on the park And that's, Ryan, now where I believe that West Indies team needs to start having their best team on the park going forward in almost every game, as many games as possible from here.
I'm not sure if you had the chance to watch Phil Simmons' press conference in the build-up to the first T20 International. He was a little bit shell-shocked, if not surprised, when a Cricinfo reporter asked him about Andre Russell being in Sri Lanka to play in the Lanka Premier League. We're not sure about what exactly happened, but how do you view that situation? Because just to reiterate, he said that he didn't want to be part of the New Zealand T20s, first of all, because of the biosecure bubble environment for another 2 weeks or whatever. And then he was injured, was out of the Lanka Premier League. Now he's there.
Well, they're inconsistent statements. Look, when I heard the squad announced for this tour and some guys took up the opportunity not to participate, I was a little disappointed, to be honest, initially. But now, having had the time to reflect, these guys are independent contractors. They are not contracted to the West Indies board. So it is their right to choose what employment they take up and what employment they reject. That is a fact. That is unquestionable for these guys. What I have an issue with, though, is the reasons or the rationale given. I think Russell said that he wanted some time off to refresh his mind, having spent time in two bubbles in the CPL and the IPL. And then you go and you take up a contract in the Sri Lankan Premier League. So there's inconsistency in that statement. And that's the only thing that I have a problem with. For the rest of the guys, West Indies cricket has been through some difficult times in recent years. These players have been central to that. So I'd like to think that if you come together and you decide, heading towards the next World Cup, as delayed as it has been, as a group, if you want to say, well, it's time to pay forward, they call it, Ryan. I think paying it forward is a term that some people use to say giving something back to the organization that helped you. Then you have to be clear in what you're saying to the public and what you're saying to the board. Don't let there be any misreadings in your reasons for missing a tour. Come straight up. If it's better employment in Sri Lanka, then come out and say, look, I'm getting paid a lot more money to go there. I prefer to do that. But don't say one thing and let it be another. So again, it's their right to choose whatever employment they want. And Phil Simmons and Karen Pollard and the West Indies board just have to deal with that. It's an opportunity for others, Ryan. And those guys can't then say, I deserve the right to come back into the team when I'm available again, because someone else may come into that space and take that place.
Let's talk a little bit about the test side. There's been a huge debate about leaving Shai Hope at home. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Shai's had a long run. Shai has been a particular favorite of mine. I won't let go of that bicycle. But he hasn't come up with the numbers that he should be expecting of himself. And so I have no problem whatsoever with the selectors saying, hey, Test cricket, we want you to be a future Test cricket star. You haven't delivered on your potential and your ability consistently so far. Please work on your game. We will work with you on your game, and hopefully we can get you back into the Test team at the adequate time.
I think a lot of people agree with you. I think what a lot of people disagree with is the fact that there are 40 practice matches and 2 West Indies A matches across in New Zealand, and they felt that Shai should have been part of at least those squads.
That's neither here nor there. One guy said he didn't want to come on this tour because of the practicality of the bubble, spending a lot of time in a bubble. And I can tell you that being in a bubble, it's not as enjoyable as some people may think it is. It is demanding. And so Shai has that time at home to be away from the grind of watching his teammates play international cricket, and to focus, maybe if he can get some sessions in Barbados and really refresh his mind. That's what I'm trying to say. So I can understand why people would think, well, there's no domestic cricket going on. there's 2 matches there, he could have come there. But I can also, from my point of view, understand, get away from the international game for a few months. Work on your game in your own private time and let us see if that works.
What about Nicholas Pooran? There were a lot of legendary voices. This is not just lay voices, but a lot of legendary voices, including but not limited to Sir Vivian Richards, saying that give him a try. He's an extraordinary talent. But on the other spectrum, you've got legends like Sir Kirtley Ambrose also saying, hang on, he's not played enough first-class cricket. He's not played enough 40 matches. He hasn't even scored runs in 40 cricket. We shouldn't allow him to just walk into the test team. Where do you stand?
I'm very clear on this. I'm very clear on the huge talent that Nicholas Pooran is. That's in the public domain. What I do feel that a lot of fans and people underestimate is how different T20 cricket is from Test match cricket. I don't think people really understand the difference, the wide range of skills that needs to be applied there, Ryan. And so I am all for the fact that Nicholas is getting a chance to play in a couple of long form games during the tour. I think that's what Roger Harper said would be available to him, because you have to tighten up your technique. White ball cricket demands that you go hard at the ball with hands. You don't always cater for movement off the seam. You don't always cater for slip fielders, the use of the short ball in getting guys to hook and pull with field set for that in Test match cricket. It's a far different beast. So I think the prudent thing, 2 points, the prudent thing is to let Pooran play some long form cricket, learn about himself, learn about technique, learn about the mindset of batting long periods of time. The other thing that I wanted to touch on there is Kieron Pollard had the same challenge as well, right? He has a better first-class average, albeit in a small sample size, than I would think 90% of the guys in the Test match team. What are we expecting from Nicholas Pooran? What's the standard, Ryan, if I may ask this? Are people expecting Nicholas Pooran to say, well, if I come in, I can average 30 as well, because that's what the other guys in the team are averaging? Well, that's low-hanging fruit. That's a really low bar, low standard. My expectation of Pooran is to be an exceptional player. So if he comes into Test cricket, I want him to be packed and ready to average 40, not 30 as a pass mark. That's a little school. That's a low school that you're talking about. So it depends on what your standards of expectations are.
This Test team, what do you expect them in the 2 Test matches against New Zealand? This is going to be incredibly difficult.
And that's why I'm looking at this with an open mind, because there are a number of factors, as you very well know as well. The bowling group has been doing an exceptional job, more so at home in the Caribbean. Kemar Roach, Jason Holder, Shannon Gabriel have been very, very good at home. The problem they've had is their numbers overseas. When last have the West Indies won a series in New Zealand? New Zealand is ranked number 2 in the world in Test match cricket. That tells you the magnitude of the task. And then you put on top of that, we've got a couple of opening batsmen. Craig Brathwaite, whose form has fallen off in the last 2 years. John Campbell, the other appointed opener, is a newbie and trying to find his way. And that batting still has not enveloped itself to where we would like it to be. So there are a number of challenges for them to overcome.
That's a challenge as well for Phil Simmons to overcome. He didn't get the chance to really work on it this year. He just had England. He'll have New Zealand now. He'll have Bangladesh at the start of 2021. What is the future of this Test team looking like? Because it seems that it's a little bit bleak. We go into every series with West Indies second favourites. Where do you see this Test team in the near future?
Hard to prophesy, because you're looking at some nice little talents that are waiting in the wings to be developed. You look at Joshua De Silva. You look at Shima Holder. Kyle Mayer's not so young, had a good domestic season, but we still are waiting to see how he can develop at the highest level. And as I said, some nice young bowlers coming through. We're still waiting for Alzari Joseph to bloom in the way and Shimron Hetmeyer to bloom and flourish in this longest format. So again, there are green shoots there, but the pandemic hasn't helped because it has robbed a lot of guys of the ability to. So while there is potential, I think this tour is significant again, as much as the England tour was, in trying to show the West Indian public that we are moving forward. As Jason Holder says, he seems to be happy with some of the strides the team has taken. Well, this tour is another opportunity for them to take 2 more of those strides.
I know that you're not a big fan of saying do or die tours for some people, but you know, if it doesn't work out for people like Darren Bravo and for people like Jermaine Blackwood and John Campbell, that's specifically what I'm asking. Where do we go from here?
Well, it's runs and wickets. Darren is what, 31? There are guys who have made their test debuts at 31. I think Michael Hussey, he started at 31 and had so many wonderful years in the game. So I know that you can be a hard taskmaster at times, Ryan, but I still think it's about runs and wickets. Blackwood, look, the example, and I understand the frustration of people. Jermaine Blackwood, I think since his test match debut back in 2014, I think he's played something like 80 odd first-class matches. How many hundreds has he got? 2. I mean, come on. John Campbell has 500 in 70 odd or 60 odd test first-class matches. Shamar Brooks, all 7 of his first-class hundreds have come in the last 5 years. There needs to be a higher turnover, but you move those guys aside. And I've been watching this since I retired. People keep saying, get those old guys out, bring the young guys in, and then the young guys come in because the infrastructure hasn't prepared them adequately enough. They too fail. Get them out, get to the next generation. Where does it stop? There are a number of things, Ryan, we need to continue putting in place post-pandemic to help these guys develop.
Let's talk about that structure. The regional 4-day structure, and it's not going to get any better because of Cricket West Indies' finances. Next year, in fact, we may have a much shorter regional 4-day season. The Super 50 Cup will be very late next year. So the structure itself isn't, you know, if anything, it's weakening as opposed to being stronger at regional level, that you want these players to come through and represent the West Indies.
Yeah, that's okay. We're all challenged. I'm sitting here in a bubble, and there are days when I wake up and I think, man, this is hard. And then I remember that there are people around Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and around the world who would cut their right arm off to be in this situation where in a couple of days' time, there's a job waiting for you because people have lost their jobs, people have lost their health. So that's not an excuse. What I think teams have done very well, Ryan, and let's look at the positive side, is that because of COVID, they're sending a lot of extra players, a lot of replacement players on tour to get a feel for international cricket. And that's where these guys have to look at such a wonderful opportunity to play warm-up games, to play amongst the senior international players, to look at other international players and move their game forward. So in the absence of a structure, this is, for some of these guys, Ryan, we talk 18 tours, this is like an 18 tour with a plus mark in front of it. You get to rub shoulders and to watch at close quarters, international players, the best in the world, the Williamsons,
The International Cricket Council has a new chairman, Greg Barclay. It took a while. It took 6 months to replace Shashank Manohar, and he did oust Osman Khawaja. What do you make of Greg Barclay being elected the new ICC chairman?
I have nothing to make of it. That's above my pay grade. Those guys form policy and they run the game at the very top tier. Those are not, at this point, those are not my concerns. I'm happy he can do in West Indies cricket. And yes, it does have an impact, but again, that's not for me to concern myself about.
Are you happy with the way the game is being run? You cover it every day.
there will always be room for improvement. I'd like to see West Indies cricket get a lot more funding, particularly given our locality. One of the things I was looking at the other day, as I sit in my room, I watch the Women's Big Bash League quite a lot. And just watching that tournament, I can see why Australia dominate the world in women's cricket in particular formats. I can see why England and New Zealand are almost always up there, because they've got players playing in this high-class league. The West Indies have 2 players here, and those 2 players haven't really covered themselves in glory this season. And so what I fear is our game, is women's game in particular, is getting left behind because Australia have this wonderful league, because India are trying to put forward a league of their own. And there are so many South Africans and English women and New Zealand women because of its proximity playing here. And so that's why I feel the finances are very important to help the West Indies with this initiative that they had recently, where they're attracting, 80 female shareholders, stakeholders, players into the women's game. That is good. So I'd like to see the ICC say, hey, let us help you. How can we help you? Is it funding? Is it structure? Is it human resource? So those are areas that they can better help the game.
Ish, thanks as always for sparing us some time to answer some of my questions. Really appreciate it.
A pleasure to be on the show with a big boy like you, Ryan.
Far from it. Thanks so much.